Hello and welcome back to the State of Education, presented by One Room Education. My name's Katie, and today I'll be your guide as we have a riveting conversation with my very first guest. Her name is Jamie, and she's a homeschooling mama of 4 boys from California, who also happens to run her very own print shop, which you can have access to. I have it linked down in the description and over at one-roomeducation.com for you. I very much enjoyed this conversation with Jamie, and I hope that you do too. So come on in, have a seat, sit back and relax, and enjoy the conversation with Jamie from Humble Heart Press. Today we have Jamie from Humble Heart Press with us today. I'm so excited to have you on. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, where you're from, your kids and their age ranges, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jamie. Obviously, I am a homeschool mama to 4 boys. The youngest is 3 months, and then they are 4, 6, and 8 years old. Time flies, doesn't it? And we are in California, West Coast. And I have been homeschooling. I started homeschooling my oldest in kindergarten. And then we had a small stint in public school, and I took my oldest out again when COVID happened, and we've been homeschooling ever since and plan to homeschool in the foreseeable future.
So what made you start homeschooling in the first place and then transition to mainstreaming and then kind of back?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I am a public school kid all the way through. I had never even heard of homeschooling until I was actually already a mom and I bought my first house. And my oldest was, it was time to start thinking about preschool and kindergarten. And we had bought our house before we had kids and didn't really consider the school district very much when we made that purchase. And then I'm doing some research on the local schools, and I kid you not, every single school in our district was ranked a 2 out of 10. Like on every category, it was poor or very poor. And I was like, whoops, should have thought about that. So I actually had this friend who grew up in a Orthodox Jewish community where homeschool is more of the standard. And I just started learning about what homeschool was from her. And from the first time I heard about it, I was just more and more intrigued and started kind of going on this journey to find out everything that I could about it and just falling in love with it more and more. And then it so happened that I met some homeschool kids and they just really impressed me, actually. There was something just special about them. There was like an innocence that I hadn't seen in my experience. And I was like, what is that? And then I would find out that they were homeschooled. And so I did that for kindergarten. And the reason that we went into public school was because we actually got into a lottery of the only school in our district that actually had a fairly good reputation. And I've known some people that had come through it. And by putting our first son in kindergarten, that would kind of ensure that any other children that we had would have a better chance of getting in. And it was really like tearing at my heart because I did love homeschool at that point already. But I was like, let's at least try it so we have the option open to us in the future. And that was okay. The classroom and the teacher were good. It was very hard on me having a lot of toddlers and the driving and the commuting. But then we moved halfway through that year, and I put my oldest in the kindergarten, and that was just a really negative experience all the way through. The days were too long. He was too tired. He wasn't connecting socially the way that he had before, and I really saw him start to get kind of depressed, and it's not his normal state. And I was doing everything I could to talk to the teachers, to be flexible. Does he need to go up a grade? What can I do? And I just felt really, I felt like there wasn't much I could do because he was away from me for so much of the day. And I didn't know what was happening on the playground, and I didn't know what was happening in the classroom. And all of our free time was kind of being eaten up by homework that wasn't at where he was at. So it just didn't feel like a good use of time. And then I was I was about to pull him out anyway when the pandemic hit, and within 2 weeks of bringing him back home, he was back to his happy-go-lucky self, and I was like, "That's it. That was the answer."
That's awesome. And that's
Yeah.
something that I've noticed with a lot of parents that were mainstream during their own education, and they meet kind of like, I call them normal homeschoolers because there's like those crazy, like, my mom used to joke that she would let us out of the basement for an hour or two to get some sunlight when we were homeschooling. And so there's like those homeschoolers that we all know are there, but they're a fringe minority of us. But
Right.
that's what popular media portrays homeschooling families as. And
Mhm.
if you don't grow up in the homeschooling community, it's kind of a shock to you that we can kind of be normal every now and then, you know.
Yeah. I was kind of
But
lucky that I didn't have a lot of prejudice about homeschoolers because it had literally just not been on my radar at all. And then when I started to meet homeschoolers, I was like, I like you people.
that's good though. Um, so
Yeah.
was this just like a random friend that you had that you didn't know did
It was,
homeschooling
yeah.
or anything?
Yeah, we just met at the play gym and hit it off, and I found her to be actually better, easier to make friends with than the people that I had met in public school. She just came up to
Mm-hmm.
me and she wanted to be friends, that we were friends. And that's been true of my experience of a lot of homeschoolers actually, is that the children are very easy to talk to and mature in a sense, talking to
Mm-hmm.
adults.
And that's
Mhm.
one of the things, I, as a homeschooling kid myself, got that. I still get that today, to be totally honest, and I'm in my 30s, that I'm able to converse with people from pretty much any background or any age group. It doesn't matter. And
Yeah,
I have attributed that, like, over the years, thinking about it and stuff, I've kind of decided that the main thing that enables the communication style of homeschooled kids is that we're not locked in a room with the same age group for 8 hours a day and then expected
absolutely.
to communicate at a different level outside of that room. You know what I mean? We're
Absolutely.
exposed to people of different ages and different backgrounds all the time as part of our normal life, so we think that that's normal. And
And
when
that can't be
we deal with
underestimated. Yeah.
right, and that's one of the things I
Uh,
tell homeschooling parents, like people that people that I work with, that I consult with, that are looking at homeschooling as a possibility, because through my private tutoring business, I do homeschool consulting too, to get families set up with that. And the main thing, of course, the question is, how do you socialize them? And my question that I ask, my response every single time, is outside of seventh grade, maybe at the oldest. When were you ever in a classroom or a work environment that you were solely around people your own age? Ever?
Absolutely.
You even in high school electives, you have
Mhm.
freshmen and seniors together, and those are completely different brain chemistries and stuff. It's only 4
Right.
years, but
And
it's
I
a
think,
huge difference.
yeah, I've actually read studies. I wish I could quote it, but somewhere early in my homeschool research, I read a study that basically said, when you put 34-year-olds in a room together, they're gonna all actually act um, younger than they are.
Hmm.
There's something that
Right.
happens socially. Whereas in my experience, and I taught a class of homeschoolers, that ranged from 7 to 14 years old, all in the same class.
Hmm.
And they were just sweet and kind and mature and openly engaged in discussion, had no
Hmm.
fear. Older ones helped younger ones
Hmm.
looked up to older ones. And I have seen that and experienced that several years now. And I don't want any other kind of social uh, situation for my children. I have been on the playground watching my children at co-op where
Hmm.
a 12-year-old will just say something very mature to my child, if my child's
Hmm.
not listening perfectly. And I've had an older, homeschool boy, like 12 years old, say to my son, you should obey your mom. In
Mhm.
just a really kind, gentle way. And I grew up on the playground in public school, and let me tell you, I did not have that kind of influence in my life. And I'm just so, so grateful for the people that we spend our time with that have those common values and are helping me instill them in my children instead of it working against me, which is inevitable when you have so many young people influencing each other.
Right, it kinda turns into, like, this dystopian Lord of the Flies situation. Like,
Yes,
honestly,
it
you know?
can. Yeah. Yes.
And
I mean, I've had a lot of bad experiences with kids on the playground in my school, and I just don't want that for my kids
mhm.
at this age anyway.
Well, yeah, at any age. I mean, as moms, it's
Yeah,
kind
at
of our
any
job
age.
to protect our kids, and if we see somebody messing with them, we're gonna wanna slap them. But,
Yeah.
you know, we're not allowed.
Yes. Yes.
But pretty much
So.
the only way that we can curb that is by surrounding ourselves with people who share those values. And I find in public school, I used to teach in public schools. And
Mm,
I find that even as a teacher in public school, it's very hard to find people that share the same sort of values that we do. So far
mhm.
as wanting our kids to communicate and be able to learn stuff outside of the classroom, the traditional American
Mhm.
classroom environment, and setting them up for real success in the real world. Because if
Right.
you send your kids to public school all the time, like my brother mainstreamed his kids from the start, and he and I have had several conversations about it. But every family has their own path,
Mhm.
and his son is so sweet. He really, I love my nephew, but he started having some behavioral problems, um, like beginning of first grade. He has always been physically much larger than his age, not just like fat, but just like a big kid. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
he was 7 and he looked like he was probably like 8 or 9. And so the older kids would come over to talk to him thinking that they were his age or thinking that he was their age. And he would talk to them and he would be so excited because the older kids were talking to him and blah, 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 you know? And when they realized that he was younger than them, they started like this passive aggressive kind of bullying with him that he didn't understand, but we as adults did.
Oh,
And his behavior just kind
yeah.
of started to spiral. And I
Mhm.
ended up having to go over and like talk with my brother and see what we could do to help him out because it
Right.
was just if he was going to continue to send my nephew to public school, it was going to be one of those things where you're going to have to debrief every day and see what's going on.
Right.
Try to curb that as well as you can. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, I
So
can't I can't emphasize that enough. I just want everyone to hear me when I say that like homeschooling is just such fertile ground for character development, for family bonding, and for just being able to be the primary influence in your child's moral character development. And that cannot be, I mean, what is more important than that, too? So,
right,
okay, I'll leave it at
that's a
that.
no, that's a great point. So what would you say to the parents that say, "Oh, I couldn't have my kid at home all day. I can't deal with my kid like
I
that."
would say you're not alone, and a lot of us have that struggle, but you really, at the end of the day, have to decide if you are willing to mature as a person and a parent to do what is best for your child. And,
Absolutely.
I'm faced with that decision every single day. In this moment, am I going to succumb to my impatience or am I going to try to be a better mom today than I was yesterday? And I'm fond of saying, homeschooling is going to sanctify you one way or another.
You're
um,
right.
because it produces perseverance because you have to persevere. It's not easy to be with the same people day in and day out. You're going to step on each other's toes, but you can use that as grounds to mature and grow and figure it out with each other.
hmm And I think that's a really good point too, so far as just like learning to be with yourself and with the people that are closest to you. Because I
Yeah.
think that that's part of the general societal problem right now too, so far as like failed marriages go and stuff like that, is that
Hmm.
we as a society have not been forced to spend time with ourselves and the people that we have chosen to be around us
Right.
in on an extended intimate sort of level. And when you're with
Hmm.
people that close for that long, it really pushes who you think you are. And
Yep.
that's why I feel that's why a lot of marriages fail. You know, if you
Hmm.
get married and you say I can't stand my husband, and then a pandemic hits and you're locked in the house with him, well, what are you going to
Right.
do? You know, you're either going to get a
Right.
divorce and try and find another apartment or whatever, or you're
Hmm.
going to work through it and you're going to persevere. Was a great word that you used.
Yeah.
It's this perseverance, this kind of grit that you need to have in your own soul to be able to get through the harder parts of life. And I agree. I think homeschooling is a great place to cultivate that within your kids and set
Yeah.
them up
Grit. I love
for
that word.
success. Thanks.
Yeah, grit is a great word. And, for people that are really hard to convince if it's a good thing, grit is one of those key elements of successful people that scientific studies will show you. People need to have grit. And I think another problem is that the busyness of our world and the constant distractions and overstimulation of all the information that we're getting
Mhm.
from teachers and peers and media and news, um, we can really avoid looking ourselves in the mirror and avoid
Mhm.
the people that we're living with. And siblings might not even have to spend all that much time together if they're running with different peer groups and always
Mhm.
going separate places. And it's not the case with homeschool. We are together a lot, and we kind of have to work through relationships.
Right. And I think that that's I noticed in public school they have this whole like in the past like maybe 5 years they've started this, quote unquote new type of education that they're incorporating into elementary, and it's the social emotional education is what they're
Mm,
calling it. And it's literally what you just described, but in an elementary classroom. And
interesting.
yeah, it if you haven't looked at it yet, take a look at what's going on in the public schools with the social emotional education. It's it's a really
I don't
interesting
want to.
study. It's not
It's,
horrible. Like
it's hard to learn. Okay, good.
it's not going to make you cry and like want to go in the bathroom and not come back out or whatever. But
Okay.
um it's really interesting that all of these like quote unquote new ideas that are coming out in the public education system are things that I was taught as a homeschool kid, and what you're talking about with your kids now as
Hmm.
just general social and emotional well-being benefits of it and familial benefits of homeschooling. And the public school is realizing that they failed, and that
Hmm.
I don't know if you've noticed, but people have gone completely insane lately. And they've decided that that's because they're not producing people that are well equipped to deal with failure outside of a classroom,
Right.
or peer pressure outside of a classroom, because they were so focused on the content and the testing aspect and not
Hmm.
dealing with the actual individual student, like the student as a whole person, not just a test grade.
Okay.
And now they're trying to fix that. Well, they're trying to address it at least. You know what I mean?
So
And it's
that's a
really interesting.
yes. And that is a great segue into my educational philosophy, which is largely Charlotte Mason. And
Okay.
one of the main tenets of a Charlotte Mason education is that as a foundational concept, we understand that people are born persons. And what
Hmm.
that means is that their mind is not just a sack that needs to be filled with knowledge bits, right?
Hmm.
Like little factoids. That's not true education. But their mind is like a living entity that needs to be fed with ideas, like just like our body needs to be fed with food. And
Absolutely. Mhm.
the whole, you know, what understanding your educational philosophy is another really important thing because it informs everything that you do, whether you're in the public school or you're homeschooling or some kind of hybrid model. You know,
Mhm.
what does education mean to you? What is
Mhm.
a person? And, you know, what are the things that are valuable? So in my education, you know, that idea is foremost in my mind. And so, you know, what I measure as success in my homeschool is not necessarily how much factual knowledge do my kids have, but is more
Mhm.
um, I'm looking at their ability to learn something. I'm looking at their level of curiosity. I'm looking at how much they care about learning new things and
Mhm.
how are they stewarding what they already know and what kind of person am I creating. Um, and so
Absolutely.
it gives me, you know, when we say we're doing school and a character issue comes up, well, because of my philosophy, I have already pre-decided that academics is going to take a back seat to addressing a certain character issue or having a heart to heart with my son or stopping to pray with him or stopping to resolve a sibling conflict.
Mhm.
So I think we all, for a while, have kind of just ceded that authority that we should have with our children's education and just trusted the authorities that be and thought, well, they know better than us because they're in the field of education. And I think it just is really important to realize that, like, what is the philosophical foundation that all of this was built upon? And is it something that you can get behind?
Right, exactly. And that's something that I address a couple times in some of the State of Education podcast episodes is this appeal to authority fallacy. It
Mm-hmm.
is what it's like actually called. And it's if you aren't confident in yourself and your own abilities, you look for someone that you think does have the abilities that you can be confident in. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a mom who is just completely floundering like all moms do and saying,
Yep.
I have no idea what I'm doing. And these people have bachelor's or master's or doctorates in how kids think. They have to know
Mm-hmm.
better than I do. And I
Nope.
understand the thought process behind that. I do. I get it. But maybe because of partially of how I was raised, like, I
Mm-hmm.
also know that that's kind of BS, you know, that
Yep.
every parent has the ability within them to step up. And
Yep.
even if you're going to continue to send your kids to public school, like many people that I know have decided to go ahead and send their kids back to school when they open, what are you going to do as a parent to fix the issues that you saw while your kid was at home? Because
Exactly.
you've
Because
been able to
you
get
are
that
still the
behind the screen.
authority.
You. Right.
Yeah.
And that's
I
they have
absolutely.
worked so hard. And when I say they, not the individual teachers, I think it's like the overall
Yeah.
political structure of teachers unions and politicians and anybody that would want to separate a family unit for whatever reason. They have worked
Exactly.
so hard to convince us that we don't know what's going on and we don't know what's best for our children to thrive in the quote unquote modern economy. So hand us
Exactly.
your,
And I
so give us
reject
your
that.
kids and there's no way, they'll be all right. And I
Exactly.
wholly reject it too, trust me.
I,
And I
I
just
wholly, passionately, fervently reject that because how does society define what an expert is? An expert is someone who has a certain amount of hours. I think it's like 6,000. I don't know the exact number, but it's like you have a certain amount of hours direct experience with that thing, and then you're
mhm,
deemed an expert. Well, who has more time with your children than you? You
right.
should be the expert in your children. And I really like this term. I consider myself the curator of my children's education. And we
Ooh,
are all the curators of our children's education, right? No matter what kind of education we choose, we are designing it by those choices.
oh, I
And
like
I
that.
think that's a good, yeah, I think it's a good term because it reminds us that we do have that ultimate authority. Like, I believe that God has given my children to me, and I have the authority from Him to raise them in the way that they should go.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a a, a calling. That's my job. That's my purpose, right? And so I take it very seriously. And I think, yeah, if this world hasn't shown us anything, it's to question everything and question the authorities, question whether it be medical authorities or governmental authorities.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in being good citizens, absolutely, but I also believe in being your own advocate for education and everything else.
Well, that's one of the things, like, I talk about a couple times on the podcast and in a couple of the articles that I've written about the founding fathers of the United States and what their vision for the country was, and the role that education
Mm-hmm.
was going to play in that. And that the founding fathers understood that if education wasn't provided to every single citizen that was going to then be able to vote, then this republic that we have wouldn't survive. And
Mm-hmm.
when they were talking about an education, they weren't talking about sitting in a classroom with people your own age fidgeting around and trying to sit still while a teacher lectures to 30 of you because they have too many
Mm-hmm.
people in a classroom
Right.
because, whatever situation arise. They were
Mm-hmm.
talking about it's called a classical education, and it is reading, writing, math, and civics.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn how to read, you learn how to do basic writing, and then you learn how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Anything other than that, you'll learn through an apprenticeship, or you'll learn through going to a specialized higher education. You'll learn what you need to go into the field that you want to go into. And the
Yeah.
civics part, civics and history, was because you have to understand the past and where your culture has been to understand where it's going to go. And you
And
have to
avoid
be
making the same mistakes.
right, and you have to be informed on the governmental systems and the structure of your government to be able to consent to be governed by it. And
I
that
love
was a
that.
big thing that America was founded on the consent of the governed. And that's why we have the Bill of Rights, right? It's to protect
Right.
our rights against the government.
Right.
And anyway,
And
sorry,
it's
I could go
so
on
important
about that
to,
forever.
yeah. Well, I love that because the more that I have read about um, the education of our founding fathers and these great historical figures, the more inspired I've been about the model that we have now that we think is normal is so not the way that it's been for ages and
Mm-hmm.
ages, and it has not, you know, um, I guess I'll just say that you might be surprised how many historical figures that you look up to that had a very similar education to homeschool, had some
Mm-hmm.
kind of homeschooling or delayed early education, learning on their mother's knee or learning to write by copying the Declaration of Independence and not
Mm-hmm.
any kind of formal schooling. So um, we can be so empowered by actually learning from our past. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things, like, my grandfather, my dad's dad, he was an aviation mechanic in the Navy during World War II. He had
Cool.
a third grade education. Life
Yeah.
circumstances happened. He was from, literally grew up on a dirt floor in the panhandle of Florida, worked a farm for his entire family. He had, I think, 6 younger siblings. He was the oldest, and he quit school in the 3rd grade to tend the farm, to provide for
Mhm.
them, and worked his way up so that he could become an airplane mechanic. That is
Wow.
insane.
That's
And he
awesome.
provided for his family. And, like, the dude is a legend around here. Like,
I can see
grandpa
that.
was able to do that with a 3rd grade education. What are you doing with your college education there? You know?
Well,
And it's that
that
he
that
was
brings up such
able
a
to
good point.
learn.
Yes, because you learn. so much through real life skills. And that is
Mhm.
one of my passions because as a public school kid, I got great grades, straight A's almost all through 12th grade. I went to an Ivy League college, I was successful on paper. And then
Mhm.
I got to life and I'm trying to manage a home and all these things. And I realized I don't know how to do anything.
Mhm.
I do not know how to cook. I do not know how to fix a car. I do not know how to manage a house well. I, I'm just like, I got a little bit resentful actually. I get emotional because I did everything they told me to do and I did it
Uh-huh.
well. And then I felt like I was thrown into real life, talk about managing money and debt. And I was just like, I'm not equipped for this. You told me that
Right.
this is what it took. You told me that my college degree was the thing. And it's not. It's not the thing.
Mhm.
So I guess that kind of led me to my passion for learning through real life skills and teaching my kids. By the time that my kids graduate, they will know how to do every kind of chore around the house. They will know basic maintenance on a car. They will know how to manage money, and they will know what they need to know and a variety of skills and not just paper and pencil skills because
Mhm.
that's not enough.
Right. And that's the thing that, and I'm not totally sure where it came from, but somewhere in like the greatest generation when they came back from World War II and they were raising the boomers and Gen X, right? Somewhere
Mhm.
around in there, the idea that college was the only way to success started
Mhm.
gaining like a ton of steam. And by the time it got to you and me, it it is literally the only path that is preached to kids. And I have some of my tutoring families. I make sure whenever I have a first like interview that I do with them to make sure that we're a good fit and everything. And I tell them that, if you're pushing your kid to go to college, I want you to go and look at these resources and then decide how you want to proceed with
Mhm.
like taking all AP classes and having 7 different extracurricular activities because it looks good on a college application. What's
Mhm.
the end goal that you want for your kid? Do you want them to have
Mhm.
all of this book knowledge and maybe not even get a job that it applies to be totally honest, in this current economy? Or do you want
Yep.
them to have actual skills that they can carry over into more than one discipline? And do you want them to have skills so that they know how to pivot in life? Because life is
Exactly.
not a straight line. Life is not clean. It is sticky, it is
Mhm.
murky, and the thing that gets lost is how to navigate through the fog and the murk and the quicksands and all the stuff that you run into. And
Right.
it's that's one of the great things that I love about homeschooling, because you can teach your kids how to do that, how to get through when life isn't pretty.
Exactly. I'm super passionate about that because my experience taking all those AP classes, not even
Hmm.
being in the band and doing all the extracurricular activities and not getting home till 10 o'clock at night, still having homework. And then I got to
Hmm.
college where it like really mattered. I was so burnt out. I wanted to be a
Hmm.
doctor. I wanted to do these other things. And, taking one more organic chemistry class with all these other kids that lived and breathed their studies, I was just like, I just can't do it right now. Like I was
Hmm.
so burnt out from so much busy work that didn't personally apply to me, and I just felt like I had potential that I didn't get to use because it was just kind of crushed out of me,
Hmm.
in the model that I went through.
Hmm.
And so to have that margin in our lives now where, when we sit down to our studies, it's laser focused and we can do a history lesson, a math lesson in 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And it is equivalent, if not more, than sitting for 60 minutes at math, because our attention is sharp, because we're focused and we're not distracted, and
Hmm.
because he's sitting with me one on one. If he misses something, I can correct it immediately. We go
Mhm.
over the lesson right away, and there's such a benefit to that, and that we just keep taking these baby steps forward in his studies. And it's rich and it's rigorous, and there's margin in our lives for
Mhm.
rest, for restoration, for creativity, for learning how to be bored and what to do with that time and steward our time well. Because we're whole people. We're not just a brain, we're not just producers, but, there's got to be that balance.
Right. I love that. So, talking about stewarding your time, busy mama,
Hmm.
you have the Humble Heart Press.
Yes.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that is and how you came up with the idea for it and all that stuff?
Sure. So, Humble Heart Press is an online homeschool printing company. And it's a funny story, actually, because my husband and I started a little print shop from home where we make little custom gospels. And that
Mhm.
was our passion. And then we got everything up and running, and the pandemic hit. And it wasn't really
Mhm.
going to work in that scenario.
Mhm.
And we're like, okay, pause. And then I'm online and I'm seeing a lot of homeschoolers falling in love with all of these digital curriculum options and going, oh my gosh, it is so expensive to print, or
Mhm.
it takes forever. Like, I'll put in a print order and it won't even be looked at for 2 weeks sometimes during the busy seasons. And I've got this print shop at my house going, I think I might be able to help with this problem. So it really came out of just a love for my homeschool community, a desire to serve them, and desire to solve a problem that I saw, because we could do it for much cheaper. Um, I have an emphasis on trying to turn around orders really quickly, because I, as a homeschool mom, know that I don't always plan 2 weeks ahead and don't have 2 weeks to wait for something to be printed. And so, um, and I also have a passion for living that unburdened homeschool life and not being overwhelmed. And so
Mhm.
the idea that as a homeschool mom doesn't mean you have to wear every hat. We already wear so many hats. We're, often cooks and accountants, and we do everything, right? Like, you don't
Right.
need to always be your own secretary as well. And if you can outsource something and use your time for the things that matter more that you do, like snuggling on the couch and reading a book to your kids, or enjoying a relaxing night with your husband, like, sometimes it does make sense to outsource. And so for those families, I just love being a resource that is available to them.
That's awesome. And as soon as I saw your stuff, I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing. I have to tell my mom." Because my my mom was homeschooling us in like mid and late 90s. And
Uh-huh.
so the internet wasn't even really that big of a thing back then on
Oh,
like a
bless her
personal
heart.
home use. Oh my god, I
Right.
know. And I remember all of the craziness that went on, and I called her and I said, "Mom, there's this print shop that's online. I think I'm gonna get a hold of this lady." And I told her like what you do, and I sent her your links and stuff. And she said, if
Uh-huh.
I would have had this when we were homeschooling, my life would have been so much easier.
Yes, yes. And I
So
just
I,
desire to make lives easier, because it should be. It should be life giving, and it should be enriching. And I just know
mm-hmm,
so many people are sitting there spending 4 hours fighting with their printers. They're spending tons of money they don't need to spend, or going to the print
mm-hmm.
shop. And it's like, no, just press click and go do something fun, and it'll come to your doorstep and it's done. Like, it's just
Well,
better.
that
And the
I saw
biggest,
your prices too, and I was like, wait, what? Like
yes,
you really
I
do have
know.
amazing prices. Not even joking. Like
Thank
fabulous.
you. Yes, and the way that we set up our shop was with that foremost, is that how can we do this as affordably as possible, having the quality print that makes you feel good to open your curriculum and be excited to teach your kids, and
Hmm.
it's quick and it's easy. Like,
Hmm.
that's what it needs to be all the time. And so, it never started with that, like, oh, how can we make money doing a business? That was
Hmm.
never the goal. That's just kind of the leap of faith. Like, it needs to make a little money to survive, but at the end of the day, like, that's not where my heart is. My heart is, let's make homeschool life easier and better.
Right. And that's where the best businesses come out of. And like I have friends that are private tutors, right? It's a community that you can get into, whatever. And they say, why aren't you charging? Like, because I work with Ivy League students and stuff. And they're
Mhm.
like, why aren't you charging Ivy League prices? And I tell them all the time because my parents couldn't afford that. When
Mm,
I want to be, I know that I'm worth the Ivy League price and I
right.
provide that experience to my families that I work with. And the kids that
Mhm.
I work with, 100%. They have at least a beer above if they follow what I do, like what I tell them to do, and
Mhm.
like without fail. And so
Right.
they're getting the same sort of treatment that people that can afford $100 or more an hour for a tutor are
Right.
getting at a fraction of that price. Because
Right.
I think that that shouldn't have a monetary barrier. I'm making enough
Mhm.
money for what my family needs, and they're getting their value out of it too. There's no reason to charge that kind of money. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
And
I do. And
just,
go ahead.
well, that's just my general philosophy on like anything that I do is there shouldn't be a financial barrier for you to provide for your kid. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
if you
Mhm.
can charge less and still be happy with your life,
Yes.
with what you're making, then why are you like, how much is enough? I don't
Exactly. And
know.
yeah, and my business, it is completely in line with my values and what I believe and what kind of world I want for my children, right? I don't want to
Absolutely.
fall into even the business ethics that everyone said, well, this is just a thing, business is not personal, and personal is not business. Well, for me,
Hmm.
I'm Jamie and I believe certain things and I'm going to live that. And I'm going to live that personally. I'm going to live that as a mom. I'm going to live that as a homeschooler and I'm going to live that as a business owner. They are not separate for me. How I handle a
Absolutely.
customer needs to be what I believe the same way that I handle my children. And I believe everyone has gifts and abilities. And I believe if everyone just put it into the pot and shared it and had faith that it would be enough, it actually would be enough. And the world would be a better place. So, in my little tiny corner of the world, Humble Heart Press, I believe, is doing that. And in my tinier part of the world, I have a Facebook group called Homeschool Unburdened. The reason that I started that, one of the reasons was that I want to have a safe place for other women and homeschoolers like me who are trying to live their values through their businesses. I have something called Small Business Saturday, and it's
Hmm.
we just take one person at a time, so it's not overwhelming, and say, hey, like, what are you doing? If you have a business, if it's homeschool related or not, because I want to celebrate that. I think it's amazing. I'm super passionate about small businesses, family owned businesses, homeschool entrepreneurs,
Hmm.
um, because it's also connected to freedom, right? The more that we can
Absolutely.
provide for ourselves, the freer we will be. And that's really
Hmm.
important. And why not spend our money with each other and people that have shared values?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that the internet, I'm going to sound so old right now, but that's one of the things that the internet has been able to provide our generation of homeschoolers with is being able to connect with each other. Like I'm in the Midwest, you're on the West Coast, and we're able to connect through the internet and over the phone and everything, and through this
Hmm.
podcast with so many other people that my
Yeah.
parents and earlier generations didn't have access to. So nowadays, it's a lot easier to connect with people that share your same values. And as far as I'm concerned, the values of freedom and education and prosperity for everybody, and one legitimately, wholeheartedly wanting that for everyone. I don't
Yeah.
think that those are partisan issues. I think that that's an
Hmm.
American value that everyone should share.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
Right
Preaching to
there
that
with
choir.
you. Yes, preach it. Yes, it should be a choice. Education should be a choice. And I'm not here to say, homeschooling is the best and it's the only way. I believe with every issue, you know, parents need to make informed decisions um, for their children, and we need to be intentional, and we need to stop just going with the flow and
Mhm.
believing what everyone tells us. That can be good to an extent, but we just have to be responsible and stop deferring that authority, because we are literally raising the next generation. Like, we are shaping the future. And I know we can get caught up in the tedium of dishes and laundry, and it just feels overwhelming at times, but we can never forget the importance of what we do. Washing the dishes can be holy ground if you are doing it with intention, and to the best of your ability. And I'm just really passionate about that.
I love that. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm not a big person that loves to do the dish. Like I'm a laundry person. I'm not a dishes person. I find like you're either one or the other. But I kind of meditate while I'm doing laundry or doing the dishes and re-ground myself for the
Hmm.
day. Like if I've had a bad day or whatever, it gives me sort of a way to refocus myself so that I don't come out as angry as I went in. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's something people get mad when they have to do chores, but it's part of life. You gotta deal with it.
Yes. And one of the ways that I have grown most as a homeschool mom, and I think I've just had more time to kind of be intentional with these things, is that I can change anything about myself. I can change the way that I think. I can change my thought patterns. I can change my habits. I can change how I structure the day and manage time. And um, and I can be intentional with these things. And I think it's harder to do that as well when you're just kind of running the race and are so busy all the time. And exactly, like, I used to get anxious about things and angry about things, and over time have been able to constantly take baby steps of growth and be, it doesn't have to be that way. I can make
Hmm.
dishes a positive thing instead of a negative thing.
Hmm.
Slash, I can teach my child how to do the dishes, and that's wonderful.
Yay! I'm not gonna lie, I can't
Yes. My oldest is 8, and he actually likes doing the dishes. I just gotta plug this in,
God
because
bless him.
another way to outsource is to teach your children how to do useful things, because they like feeling useful, even if they
Hmm.
complain at first. So he's learning to do the dishes, and now he does it and he hums while he's doing it, and it just like
Aw,
fills my heart up, because I mean, what 8-year-old little boy is just sitting there humming doing dishes, right? Like,
I love
so
it. That's
don't
awesome.
underestimate the value of like a child contributing to the family in a meaningful way and learning how to do these little skills, because it doesn't all have to be on mom or dad.
Right. And that's how it was not in the beginning, but in the past, that's how it was. Not that you have
Yeah,
to treat your child like a mini adult or whatever, but that they learn skills at home to then move on to be their own successful adult.
exactly. Like your grandfather, or I think of the pioneers often when I'm questioning
Mhm.
what I'm doing, and I just think of the value of, like, it used to be a real thing where children would learn a lot growing up beside their parents and working together.
Mhm.
It's only a fairly recent phenomenon where we thought children would be better served in a classroom for 8 hours a day and writing papers all night than, doing dishes at home.
Right. And that's we're going to have to do this again if you would be willing
I would love that.
because I
Of
feel like
course.
we have a lot more to talk about.
Yes. I could go on all day. I love this topic.
So let's go ahead and see what is if you had one thing, just like one idea to share with
Mm,
someone that thought that homeschool kids were weird, kind of came from where you did before
mhm.
you started researching homeschooling. What would be one thing that you can share with them about the educational value? Not necessarily just the, you know, I love having my kids home, but the
Mhm.
one thing about education you've learned through homeschooling and what you would want to share with them.
Sure. Well, I've kind of touched on it when I talked about, my philosophy and being Charlotte Mason.
Mhm.
Um, but I have found, a, never to underestimate the potential of your child's ability to learn. You may have to discover how they learn best. their learning style. You may have to do a little bit more learning yourself about educational philosophy, but I am just convinced that the sky is the limit for all children, and we can give them more, and we should be giving them more. And I believed in it before I started it, but
Mhm.
now that I've been doing it several years and I'm seeing the fruits of what I started 5 years ago, I'm just like, oh man, oh man, if this is what my 8-year-old can do, I just imagine when he's older.
Mhm.
And I'm not to say they're challenging days, I've struggled teaching reading and these things, and it's a process of faith, but it is rich. It can be really, really rich. And I just encourage everybody to question all of their assumptions about how best to educate children and what that, and I guess what education even is, what you want out of it.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things with one room education that I talk about pretty much everywhere that one room education is that each student is their own unique being, like you had said, and that just because we don't necessarily understand how they view the world doesn't mean that they're
Hmm.
not able to learn things and become a successful adult. And
Absolutely.
I
And
think that
teach us
that's
things along the way.
right. And that's whenever I'm a certified teacher, and when you go to school for education, one of the things you learn are the different levels of understanding of a subject or of a topic. And the first level of understanding is being able to repeat it, right? The second level
Hmm.
is being able to recall it. And the third level is being able to teach it.
Hmm.
So you don't fully have a grasp on a topic or an issue until you can talk to somebody else that doesn't necessarily have the same knowledge set that you do or the same understanding of it.
Hmm.
And because you have to be able to break it down to the base steps and the base concepts. And if you're not able to do that, then you don't fully understand what you're talking about yet. And I think that
Hmm.
that's something that's very much missing in our society is that ability to break everything down to its most simplest form to share it with each other. And that's something that
Right.
you learn when you're teaching your own kids or the older kids helping the younger kids at homeschooling
Yes. It
co-ops
happens
or
very naturally. Yes.
mhm,
I don't even have to
absolutely.
structure that. It happens so naturally with my kids. My oldest two, the 6-year-old and the 8-year-old, they have created a game where they give each other math problems and try to challenge each other. That, or I'll be cooking dinner and they'll be like, "Mom, give me a math problem," and I'm like, "No, I'm busy. I'm trying to. I can't even think right now." Or like the other night, my 6-year-old was teaching my 4-year-old how to count by tens. And
Yeah.
on the way somewhere, my 8-year-old was like, "I wish I was a water vapor so I could go up into the clouds and do all these things." And then this whole discussion about like the states of matter happened in the car on the way somewhere. And it's just so natural. Like, I don't even have to
That's the
do anything.
best.
This is just
Yeah.
happening right now.
Yep.
Like, what more could you want for children truly like assimilating that knowledge and making it a part of who that they are? I find that it happens really organically in our homeschool.
It does. And it sounds like you have everything set up to allow that to foster and grow though. And that's the important part.
Right. Yeah. And some of it, I don't even know how it happened, but it did, and I'm just really thankful for it.
Through grace. That's how it happened.
Yes. Yes.
So I know
Yeah,
that
but
you have
that's
a
the thing I
baseball
want to.
game
Yes,
and
I do.
I don't want you to
I
be
could talk
late.
about this all day. That's
Oh,
okay.
I could do.
Are you
So I want to make sure that you have a chance to go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you on social media or get a hold of you for your printing
sure?
services.
Yes. So Humble Heart Press printing services are at humbleheartpress.com. Hopefully easy to remember. The
Mhm.
gospels that we make are at www.customgospels.com. I'm on Instagram as Humble Heart Press, and I have a private Facebook group called Homeschool Unburdened.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to go ahead and link all of those in the description of this podcast and also over on One Dash Room Education, where there will be notes and references for you.
Great.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And I know that my listeners are just going to absolutely love you. And I really hope that we can do this again.
Absolutely. I have really enjoyed talking with you, and anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. I will talk to you soon.
I wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation with Jamie from Humble Heart Press. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that you did too. If you liked today's episode, please make sure that you are subscribed and following this podcast on whichever platform you happen to be listening to me on. Please make sure to head over to one-roomeducation.com to get a full catalog of One Room Education content, as well as ways that you can support my work. While you're there, make sure to sign up to get notifications straight to your inbox every time I upload new content. As a special bonus, the first 100 people to sign up for email notifications from oneroomeducation.com will get early bird access to this very podcast, where all new episodes will be available to you a full 24 hours before the general public. Make sure to head over to one-roomeducation.com to sign up to get those email notifications. Again, this is available only to the first 100 people to sign up for those email notifications. After that, it will go behind the paywall as the members only section. If you would like some behind the scenes content from One Room Education, as well as just some general inspiration throughout the week, feel free to head over to our socials and follow me there. On Facebook, I am at One Room Education, all one word. And on Instagram, you can find me at oneroom_education. You can also find us on Pinterest and Rumble now as well. If you don't know, Rumble is pretty much YouTube's only viable competitor right now. I will leave all of the social media links in the description below so that you have easy access to them. I wanted to take a moment again and say thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and I look forward to seeing you next time as we continue the discussion of the state of education.